again. Thanks for joining us. This is Impartial Partisan. I'm Adam Fleeman.
And I'm Fred Swann.
And this is a show that you can tune into and you can catch opinions that you won't hear anywhere else. And today especially because I'm riled up. I'm riled up after the past 2 weeks, Fred. It's been nuts.
Yeah, it has been. We are full on into the campaign season, and it's time for front runners to really hold their own, and for anybody behind the front runner to try to make the front runner look bad or to try to catch some press for themselves. So it's time for some crazy talk to start coming out of the woodwork.
Well, Fred, I'm telling you right now, because we're doing this show, I'm having to pay extra careful attention.
Right.
I'm really, really watching, and I'm into it. And I'm learning a lot. And it doesn't make me happy. It doesn't give me a lot of hope. The first story that we're going to talk about today is actually sort of how Congress and how the Senate work to go nowhere.
Right. This is an example of the old saying, you don't want to know how sausages and laws are made. This is an example of that. It's a hyper-partisan issue that is muddying down deeply needed road improvements that need to be made.
Exactly.
So you brought this to my attention. You want to go ahead and jump off on it?
Look, I showed you the story, but it's not necessarily the story. I mean, specifically after the 2 weeks, between our shows that we've had, this is one party looking at a bill and then attaching something so that nobody else is going to vote for it.
Right.
I almost look at it and think, everybody wants this.
Right.
And you attach something to it that is bad, and then the American people don't want you to vote for it, so you lose the good part because you attach something bad to it, which just leads to more nothing getting done. And like I said, I'm learning a lot. I'm realizing this happens every time, doesn't it?
Right. Now what Adam is referring to is a major highway spending bill. And this is essentially a bill to continue to improve our eroding infrastructure, highways, roads, bridges, etc. It is just part of the business of government to take care of these things, and it's normally a very mundane thing.
Now, what does it have to do with bank regulation?
I'm going to go with nothing. But I'm certain that there are members of the Republican Party who could probably figure out a way to make that.
Well, I would say the thing stapled on the back now makes it related. For some reason, bank deregulation was put on top of this bill that would have created jobs. It would have made our infrastructure a little bit better. And like I said, it's been a crazy week, and I'm learning too much.
Right. Now, see, this is what's interesting about this bank deregulation, because what they're trying to break down is the Consumer Financial Protections Bureau. They're trying to further weaken it. Now, think about just the name of that, Consumer Financial Protection. So we're protecting consumers of the financial markets. We very famously had a breakdown of our financial markets in 2007 because of the repeal of something called Glass-Steagall. And that basically meant, Glass-Steagall basically meant that banks there were investment banks and there were banks that held deposits. And never the twain shall meet. You couldn't go take the deposit money and go play with it in the casino of the market. Now, funny that the Republicans kept using, no, it's Democrats, who kept using the word casino throughout their time in Las Vegas. It wasn't just because they were in Vegas, because they were trying to make a point about the financial markets.
Well, Glass-Steagall's a big deal, and I always hear gambling. I always hear gambling when
exactly.
I hear
Well,
Glass-Steagall.
once Glass-Steagall was repealed, which was repealed under the Clinton administration, passed by a Republican administration, signed by a Democratic president,
and supported by a Democratic nominee, if I'm not mistaken.
Possibly. I think that she has said that we need something other than Glass-Steagall. So I think we can get into that a little more. But basically, after that, they could then take those deposits and throw them into the market with the thought that the market builds wealth faster than letting it just sit there and accrue interest. So obviously it would garner in more deposits. The problem is they weren't putting the money back, and like anybody who's ever played in a casino, they were just letting it ride until Bear Stearns collapsed, until suddenly...
Who does that in the casino?
Just about anybody who loses all their money eventually.
Okay. All right.
I mean, like real professional gamblers obviously don't do that, but obviously we're not dealing with professionals, we're dealing with bankers.
With bankers, yeah.
So they know this would not pass on their own. It would not pass on its own, or it wouldn't be signed by the president. It would pass because we have a Republican Congress, but it would not be signed by the president. Mm-hmm. Now they're setting up a point where it can pass even without Democratic votes, but they could not get enough to override a presidential veto. So now they have to ask Democrats, do you want your precious roads? And how badly do you want them? And then President Obama, do you want to be the guy who's known for vetoing spending on highways?
So these amendments that are getting tacked onto bills is nothing but a hostage.
Right. That's exactly right.
It's basically taking the bill hostage and saying, give us something, or we're going to make it fail by adding ridiculous legislation to your bill. And like I said, how often do you think this happens?
All the time. It happens all the time. You look at, this is not a new thing. This is a way that congressmen get little pet projects for their districts. This is why they call it pork barrel spending, because it's bringing home the bacon. You have a large bill and you tack on to it $100,000, $200,000 for this little project in your district. And then, no harm, no foul on a $30 million bill, right? It's just me bringing home some bacon to my constituents because I'm just there for my constituents.
I like bacon.
I'm a fan, despite the fact that apparently it causes cancer or something now.
Oh, yeah.
I'm still eating it, obviously. But now this is a little different in that these are deregulations that are being put forward by banking lobbyists.
Well, I don't think anybody in Congress is actually writing their own bills anymore.
Well, no. I mean, some are.
Maybe Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren wrote
yeah.
the legislation for the Consumer Financial Protections Bureau.
Yeah.
I mean, she wrote that, but she might be the smartest lady on the Hill. So, but a lot of these people know they're not. The lobbyists are writing the bills, and the politicians are just basically the people who are co-signing on it, essentially.
Well, the more we talk about it, just the more mad I get, because I hear about all these bills that go up, and I only hear the front end. I only hear the front end of it and doesn't pass, and I think that it's legit. But there's these backdoor meetings happening that we're not told about until we hear that some amendment was put on it. But we're not. That's not the whole story.
Nope.
The whole story is that there's a mafia in Washington right now, and they're playing tug of war with each other, and neither side is winning. It's like they have equal weights on both sides of the rope, and this side wants to get this done, so this side attaches something that they don't want, and they just finger cuff it out.
And there are two kinds of ways that you can have an attachment defeat a legislation. There is this, in which if it's defeated, fine, it makes the other side look good, but if it passes, good, because it passed something we wanted anyway. There's also a poison pill, which this is not necessarily a poison pill. Poison pill is where you essentially put in something so heinous that if they vote for the major bill, you can then say that they voted for the thing. For example, I think there was legislation put forward where they were also going to permit late-term abortions, and that was put in as a poison pill so that nobody else would touch it. It was a very benign bill up until that point, and then all of a sudden it became toxic, and nobody would touch it. It didn't come out of committee.
This is pretty poisonous. The deregulations of banks, considering that we've lost regulations already. This makes everything pretty bad. This will make Democrats look pretty bad if they couldn't get this to pass, even though it's not like we get anything passed anyway.
But this isn't something that's so egregious to everybody, because there are some pro-business conservatives who would see this as a good thing, see the regulation as something that's a huge roadblock.
The top earners in our country would love this.
Sure,
because it's less money they have to spend.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we got to move on. As much as I would love to continue talking about how much we take it in the rear end from Washington.
I am certain we will see more and more of this as we go on. We'll cover more, and we'll watch this bill very closely to see what they're able to put forward.
All right, what do we got next?
Up next, we're talking about guns again. This time, a study that looks at gun deaths versus motor vehicle deaths.
Stick around; you're going to like this. Welcome back. Fred, you got the next topic for us?
Yes, I do. This actually came out of a PolitiFact Texas article. PolitiFact had rated a statement by Hillary Clinton as mostly true when she said that 90 Americans a day die from firearms. And they rated that mostly true. So then someone else came and said, hey, hold on. You're not even thinking about how many people die from motor vehicles. Does that mean that we need to give up our motor vehicles? Because obviously she was saying, let's give up our guns. She wasn't. And so PolitiFact decided to actually test that assertion. Do more people die from motor vehicle deaths every year than from guns? And what they found was that actually over the past... from the decade before, say, 2007...
14 years?
That was very, 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 very true. Like, probably double deaths from guns over motor vehicles. But that there's been a sharp decline in motor vehicle-related deaths, and now...
Motor vehicle over guns.
Motor vehicle over guns. Yeah. There's been a sharp decline in motor vehicle deaths, and now there are more gun deaths than there are motor vehicle deaths.
Well, I wanted to ask, because Bill Clinton passed a law that basically banned manufacturers from manufacturing particular types of guns.
Sure.
That was only good for 10 years?
Right, and then it sunset.
When did it die? Because there's dates on this chart.
I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up.
Because I was wondering if the date that dropped is when we start seeing, because it's not a big rise. You can look, the chart right here, it's not a big rise. It's a slight increase.
Yeah, the chart's here, and the lower one is the guns, the higher one is the motor vehicles. And it's actually a slow, steady increase, and honestly, it doesn't show, the gun deaths to me doesn't show any kind of trend like anything moving significantly up. I think there was some data related to mass shootings, stating that mass shootings went down while the assault weapon ban
I've seen that chart
was in effect, but I'd have to dig into that a little more. But so the point they were trying to make is that, or they weren't trying to make this point, but the point that I extracted from it was that motor vehicle safety regulations have been on the rise this whole time. And so seatbelt enforcement, airbag regulations on manufacturers on how safe to make vehicles.
Additional fines for not doing recalls in time.
Exactly. Yeah. All of those things have been on the uptick, and those things have finally caught up and started having an effect.
Was there anything in particular in, I guess, from 2006 to 2007... Because there's almost a sharp decline.
There is.
Right there. And once again, like you're looking at it and you're like, hey, did anything happen here? I didn't really see anything. It's a very, very short article, and it doesn't really mention...
Right, because they don't really go into it. They're just going into strictly the numbers.
These are the numbers.
And I want to say that there isn't any one thing. It's more like an accumulation of many things that are coming together.
I'm still waiting for the Demolition Man foam that comes out of the car.
Right, exactly. Or, if they could have like the self-driving car, we've having those coming around. Probably they're saying like 2020 maybe. But, then
we got to have an infrastructure that the cars can drive on.
Well, I don't know. The Google car doesn't need any infrastructure.
We need roads.
Well, okay, so what we need is a self-driving, all-terrain vehicle.
Yes.
It just Mad Max, it has to fly. Demolition Man.
The wheels come up like the DeLorean, and it flies.
Can it also take in garbage and fly on that? Because
it's a good idea.
That would actually also improve the environment.
It's a good idea.
We're just coming up with ideas here, people.
Go hug a tree.
But I think that the point that I take from it is that sensible gun regulation, especially sensible gun safety regulation, could improve these numbers. They're not a silver bullet. They're not going to stop every death. They would not have stopped the mass shooting at this school or that school, but I'm going to tell you, they would save more lives than arming every teacher would.
Look, Georgia just passed. Well, not just passed. I guess it was 4 years ago, gun regulations for the state that basically says police stations. I actually have it right here. So this bill, SB 350, requires local governments to make an effort to return firearms to innocent owners, just like any other stolen property. And it didn't stop there. It says right here, this is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It says, just like juvenile delinquents, all guns deserve a second chance at finding a worthy parent. Local governments are now supposed to... Hey, I'm not done. Local governments are now supposed to auction off all confiscated but unclaimed firearms to a properly licensed dealer.
Okay, now, I'm not certain I have a big problem with that. I mean, I would say that we have a gun glut, so that the idea that we're having to return them back into circulation as if we got some sort of shortage is kind of ridiculous. But are they truly comparing guns to children as if we have to protect...
Just like juvenile delinquents. So, I mean, your children, obviously, they're comparing it to your children.
They're right. My juvenile delinquents, right. And they deserve a second chance.
No, but here's the thing that you will like.
Okay.
Atlanta is not complying.
All right.
They're not doing it. They said they won't. There's a news story, and we'll link the Atlanta Journal-Constitution article down below.
Right.
I just thought you would like that tacked onto this.
Yeah, I did not know about that, so I did not read that article.
And this was Nathan Dill that signed the law back in 2012, so you can even go down and check it once we're done.
I know, I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
Well, look, here's the thing. I'm not going to say I'm in favor for any municipality not complying with laws that have been passed. If that's the law, that's what you need to do. But this is why elections matter. This is why every vote matters, because these are things that this wasn't passed by Congress. This wasn't signed into law by President Obama.
This was local.
This is local. So the question that I always ask people is, do you know who your state representative is? Do you know what district you live in? Do you know who your state senator is? Do you know where they would have stood on a bill like that, where they're more worried about the rights of inanimate objects versus the rights of people to have lives and safety? That's the question that I think everybody needs to ask. That's why local elections, to me, matter more than even the national circus. I would much rather be covering local politicians because, to me, they matter more. But national politics is what gets the people excited.
We just had a round of a lot of local elections.
Yes.
And on the surface, it looked like people who were on the left lost big. I think one of those losses was actually a win. That was the pot deal in Ohio.
Yeah.
The pot failed, but the article that I read said like only 10 people could grow it, and they were going to be the sole manufacturers of this product to sell it to people. It was a very, very bad bill.
It was a flawed bill. It was an attempt to horn in on this local marijuana legalization craze and to attempt to cash in on it. I will say that
I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it failed, but I'm glad it happened because now people that are on the legalization movement that are actually going out and voting on it will be a little bit more skeptical when they go to the polls, and it won't be legalized under any reason whatsoever. Now, people who are on that side are going to have to read the fine print and find out exactly what is inside of that law that they're voting for.
I saw a local, I think Columbus local newscast where they had people come out after they had voted, because there was actually two amendments. One, Amendment 2 removed monopolies, or made monopolies illegal in Ohio. Any state-run monopoly. And then the third one created these marijuana monopolies. And so essentially, if you voted yes on 2, it negated your vote on 3, essentially. And so people were coming out and they were asking them, well, what did you think about the vote? How did you vote? And they were like, I was really confused. I really didn't know which way to vote. And that's kind of the game that politicians played, where they put it in confusing language so that they were very confused by it. And so, I think it lost like 60 to 30, something like that.
Well, we're not done with guns yet. I have an article, and coming up next, we're going to talk about school shootings and how they might be contagious. Stick around.
All right, welcome back. And Adam, you brought to my attention another gun-related story. I actually don't think we planned this. We actually both found gun-related things, and they actually end up kind of being like a point-counterpoint. So this is kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, this was more of a study, and the story came from CNN, and it basically it was published in July in the Journal of PLOS One, PLOS1. And it found evidence that school shootings and mass killings, defined as 4 or more deaths, spread contagiously. And that's 20 to 30% of such killings appear to be the result of infection, and the contagion lasts about 13 days. Mm-hmm. And the patient zero is the media.
Okay.
So what do you think about this? So there's a mass shooting that happens. It hits all the news outlets, and for 13 days, we're susceptible to infection for another mass shooting.
Right.
That's what the study is saying.
Right. Now, I found the study to be interesting. I was kind of taken aback with their conclusion. Like, it's plausible, but I almost wonder if there's a correlation causality error they're making. Like, can they really say for certain that it's the media that's causing this infection?
Our lives are filled with so much garbage that it could be any particular thing that sets somebody off. It could be a Twitter war that we don't even know about that sets somebody off. It could be anything. We're so connected to so many different outlets, and not just media, not just social media, but family, our social zones outside of the internet. We're connected in so many different ways that who knows what that trigger is.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of where I think that studies like this are interesting, but they have kind of a limited prescriptive ability. I mean, because at the end of the day, what is that you're asking? Are you asking for a media blackout?
Well, you'd have to be crazy first anyway. Like, if the media is going to set you off, you'd have to be crazy first,
right,
to get set off anyway. So how do you really do a full scientific study on something like this? Other than looking at dates, and we have a lot of mass shootings, so you're going to be able to find a lot of links in a lot of different places.
One of the problems we have with studying the mass shooting phenomenon is that Congress has passed legislation that makes it illegal to spend federal funding to research gun deaths, which means that nobody is studying it because there's no money there.
Exactly, and you're going to get me mad again. Don't start.
Well, I mean, because so the few who do study it, their studies end up being a very limited scope.
They're done in a bubble.
Right.
I'm glad we're looking at it. But again, this was it's linked down here.
Yeah.
This was just one of the things I came across that, one, it's definitely CNN telling us to be scared.
Right.
But like, it's almost anti-news. Like CNN's the network that goes on and on and on and on about any particular topic, and only one of them is saying, if we're reporting on a school shooting, I don't want to tune in.
Right. Well, I mean, but are we really going to stop the viewer from watching something the media is broadcasting, or are we going to stop the media from broadcasting it? Or once the media broadcasts something, are we suddenly going to beef up security at our gun-free zones so that because we know there's about to be an outbreak in that area?
I mean,
that's what I'm saying. It's
there's nothing we can do there's nothing we can do to news outlets. I mean, as far as us, the people, and the government, we're the same. So there's nothing we can do to stop them from showing this. The only thing that we could do, I guess, is discourage. But I don't know if you've noticed, Columbine, the first thing they came out with was the kids' names.
Right.
That was the first thing they came out with. And then a few shootings later, you heard a couple of anchors say, I'm not going to say their names. And I don't know. And then a few shootings later, we're not going to show their picture or say their names. And a few shootings later, we're not going to read their manifesto. But no matter what we don't do, it's not stopping or hindering the problem that we're having. I don't.
Right, and the idea behind that was that some of these shooters want to be famous, and so they want to
allegedly.
The idea is that some of these shooters want to be famous, and so since they garner fame, since these other people have garnered fame, everybody knows the name of the Columbine kids. So
I don't remember the name of the Columbine.
Dylan and Eric.
Okay, those sound familiar.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. Okay, I'm sorry, continue.
But everybody knows the names of those shooters, and so they feel like that's like a level of infamy for them, maybe a level of immortality for them, on top of the fact that they can get through whatever demons that they're dealing with and exercise those at the point of a gun. They can also come out with some notoriety. And so this idea where, I'm not going to say the names because that's just giving them what they want, or I'm not going to say what they were angry about because that's just going to give them what they want. Again, this is why study would be important, because I want to know, have those measures had any effect? Let's have a time when we ask a news agency to give it all and see what happens versus only release this bit and see what happens, and then, we just tally up the results.
Now, they did say in the article that it was Catherine Newman, and she wrote Rampage, The Social Roots of School Shootings. Mm-hmm. She said that media coverage may prompt copycat crimes, but shining the national spotlight on mass school shootings can have benefits also. It encourages students and adults to come forward with information about suspicious people. And it goes on and on. So, there is definitely a catch-22 here where it's important to show these things on the news, but also I sort of agree with not necessarily saying the names, even though if I see that there's a school shooting, I kind of look up and see who did this. I'm always interested to see if it's a white guy, because it usually is. I'm always interested to see that. But
and every minority is just like, oh God, please don't be one of us. Yeah. Please don't be one of us. Because honestly, if it's a Caucasian male, it's an isolated incident.
But nobody's surprised.
If it's a black man, then it was gang related, or he's a thug, or it's, the black community needs to get their act together. If they're Hispanic, then they're an illegal, whether they were born here or not. So, all of these labels get ladled on. So, there are certain groups who definitely look on not just out of some morbid curiosity, but also out of self-preservation for their own identity.
Now, and like I said, that was on CNN. I do want to move on. So coming up next, we're going to talk about CNBC. We're going to talk about the debate there a little bit, but more the aftermath and the behind-the-scenes stuff from what we can see after everything, from hindsight.
The very, very, very serious candidates that the Republicans are putting forward, and the very, very serious allegations that they have made.
Don't go away. All right, welcome back. First, before we get into this next one, I want to thank everybody for sticking with us for this long. This is, our third episode? We're going to keep rolling these things out. I really want to give a shout out to the Team Bork. They left us a lot of comments that they're our biggest fan. possibly our only. But they left a lot of comments on the last video, and we're definitely reading them. Fred, you need to go back and you need to talk to him.
Yeah, I really do. I need to get in there and interact because he left a lot of good points. But I would recommend definitely anybody else to go in, interact on those comments, reply, or tell us something, and then we'll go in and reply to whatever comments you guys made. I did want to, before we go on, I wanted to make one clarification to our last segment where I was making a point about race and guns. I was not necessarily saying that if African Americans shoot people that they are thugs. I was saying that is the label that is placed on people. Same thing with Hispanics, if they are suddenly illegals despite the fact of wherever they were born. I'm saying that that's the label that we put on people. And so people of various different interests look very closely at who's doing what shooting, because suddenly that's going to have a deep impact on what other people say about their community.
And I wanted to go on the record to say that the label I put on white people to be more likely to do the mass shootings, I meant it, every word of it, because it's a fact. I'm sorry.
You're racist!
it's just the way it is. It's fact right now. Until there are other people doing these things, right now it's white people doing it. For the majority, it's white people doing it.
So I'd like for the white community to really step up and do something about the mass shootings.
Get your thugs in line. All right, so also we were just talking about viewers. If you like the content we're putting out, go ahead, subscribe, like, again, comment, let us know what you'd like us to talk about, because we're up for just about anything.
Sure. If you have a recommendation, if you see an article or something that you're like, hey, talk about this, we'll talk about it.
Exactly.
It may not be what you want to hear. We'll talk about it.
And you can do it. You can do it down here in the comments, or you can send us a message on Twitter. I'm at St. Riffraff.
And I'm at Fred Swann.
All right, so the next thing and the last thing we're going to talk about, because it's going to make me mad, is going to be this debate that happened on CNBC.
Mm-hmm.
We live tweeted this debate.
Yes.
And I honestly, while we were watching it, I didn't really notice that these questions were out of line. Now, some of them were worded weird, but you got to realize that there's ratings on the line, and this is a capitalist country.
Right.
And CNBC wanted to make the most out of their ratings. So sometimes you got to say, did they say clown cart, clown shoe, comic book
campaign?
Comic book campaign, like,
was what they referred to Donald Trump's campaign.
They're getting the most out of it, but if you take that comic book campaign out of the question, I'm pretty sure it was a substantive question. I don't remember exactly what it was.
It was a poorly worded question.
Yeah.
Essentially, the question was, is your campaign? It was basically, is your campaign really serious? Because it doesn't look very serious. And can you defend what your campaign has been doing? And there are better ways to ask it than what they asked it.
Now, the way you asked it didn't sound very good either.
Right, because it's not a serious campaign.
Okay.
But, if I really wanted to, dress it up, I probably could and make it all pretty for the person and serve it to them, on a nice silver platter.
Well, that's what they want. They want caviar questions.
Okay, this is my problem with the whole thing is they're basically upset because of the way CNBC asked the questions. They're mad because they feel like they weren't treated very nicely.
But they also came out and said that the questions were bad.
Right.
In fact, it was Ted Cruz that was going off when they asked him a question that had substance to it, and he just refused to answer it.
That was part of the big problem, was that they had serious objections to some of the questions. The first question out of the gate was, what is your biggest weakness? That's like the worst interview question
but there's
in
always,
the world.
Every debate has those questions. Let's not say that this was different than any other debate.
No, I'm not saying it's different than any other debate. I'm just saying that kind of typifies the badness of some of the questions.
And I would say
then they would follow up on a substantive question about, say, the debt ceiling, or about the deficit, or about weapons in Iran, or something like that. And then the person answering the question would take that time to attack the moderators instead of
mainstream media.
Instead of taking the time to attack the moderators on the question that was silly.
Yep.
They would take a serious question, which makes me think they're not very serious.
Now, there's more. There's more to this because the stuff we're talking about is moot at this point.
Right. It's over.
Because the debate's over, and the RNC has now said we're pulling any future debates with NBC, not CNBC, but with NBC, and there's
NBC Universal, right?
Yeah, we're pulling this, and Fred, I'm sorry, but this is what makes me furious because it shows us. It's right in our face right now. It shows us that there's a reason why certain news outlets tank the way that they do. It started coming together as I was reading this week. Mm-hmm. Like, there used to be a time when you could turn on to MSNBC and you would see Republicans on MSNBC.
Right.
And specifically Chris Matthews. And Chris Matthews would give Republicans the business.
Sure.
And gradually you saw less and less Republicans.
Right.
And this highlights why that happened. When one particular senator, congressman, political party, or just representative goes onto a news outlet and they get the business, they get asked hard questions, which we want hard questions asked. The Republicans they said they wanted hard questions asked after the debate. If they're asked the hard questions because we don't have this fairness doctrine anymore that we were talking about earlier. This Republican, this congressman, this representative won't go back to that news station. And this creates a huge problem. It creates a big problem because they can control access now. Mm-hmm. And the last thing that a big outlet CNBC sort of, but you go NBC, CNN, or Fox wants to do is burn a bridge with somebody that goes on. Because once that bridge is burned, then they don't have anybody to interview for that spot anymore. I want to know what you think about all this.
Well, especially because they're doing these almost as, they're a way to get ratings. But honestly, liberal media aside, the idea of the liberal media, there's no such animal. There's a sensationalist media, and there is a ratings-driven media. There is a media that wants to get the funny story. They want to get the gaffe. They want to get the thing that's going to drive ratings. Republican Party is going to drive ratings. He was showing me the picture of during the recent
we'll put this up here.
The recent South Carolina debate forum.
I took this picture. I thought it was. Right. I thought it was funny. I took the picture.
Right, but I think it highlights a point. That, you talk about the liberal media, and that's kind of what they were railing on, is the liberal media. There is no liberal media. There's a sensationalist media.
Well, facts do have a liberal bias.
Well, I think that they sometimes do. Yeah. But the thing about it is that the media really cares more about ratings. They care more about how much can they get viewers in, and so
they have stockholders.
Right, they have stockholders, and so they're not. Really, they don't have a political bent. Some of the reporters do, and but the editors and the producers, they have, a financial.
It's all about money.
Right. And so what's going to happen with this is that RNC pulls out, which they're going to pull out the major ratings giver.
For the season.
For the entire season, because really, they're not doing this as a way to garner votes for Hillary or votes for whoever. They're trying to get ratings, and so eventually they will cave to this pressure.
Well, this is blackmail. This is saying you're not going to get this because you were mean.
Absolutely, because you asked the tough question that the American people needs to know.
That wasn't tough.
We're going to take our ball and go home.
We're going home.
And we will play with Fox News, or we will play with whoever else will host our debates, and you can just go and not have any ratings.
And that's bad for everybody. It's bad for these candidates. It's bad for the Republican Party. It's bad for the Democratic Party, and it's bad for the news. Like it doesn't make any sense for.
It's bad for Republicans. It's bad for Republicans because it gives them a black eye. Quite frankly, my Twitter, I could not stop seeing tweets. I couldn't stop tweeting myself about how they were crybabies, and they are crybabies. Yep. This is not that big a deal, people. If they ask an unfair question, answer it in the spirit it was given. And then wait for the next question on the deficit or the debt or whatever really issue you're driving.
And if you don't like the way it was phrased, just phrase it the way you like when you answer the question. And answer your own question basically in that same topic the way that you want it phrased. Because that's real debate. You take what's given to you and you phrase it the way that best fits what you want to say anyway.
Sure.
Because you're going to talk about what you want. That's what these aren't real debates anyway.
No, they're not.
Real debates are structured in such a way.
This is not Lincoln Douglas by any means.
Yeah. So you can... This is just the moderators ask a question and then you talk about whatever you want. So I don't even understand why.
but the bigger point is the reason why I think this hurts the Republican Party. Republicans, are you looking at me? I want you to see me so you understand what I'm about to tell you. This infographic right here says it all. How in the world can you actually stand up to Vladimir Putin or to the Iranians or to ISIS if you can't answer a question when somebody accuses you of having a comic book campaign? Answer the question, the spirit was given, not very serious, obviously, and then move on.
Because if you do become president, if any of you do become president, you're going to be asked some jacked up stuff from time to time. I mean, maybe you can go back and look at some of the footage that President Obama's had to deal with. All right, Fred, well, I think we've yelled at each other and the camera enough for the day.
Right. I feel better. I've exercised some demons. Yeah. I feel better. Thank you for the therapy session.
I feel better. I want to thank everybody for joining us and for listening to us bitch, moan, gripe, complain, and vent our frustrations. Vent your frustrations down in the comments section, and we will respond.
Tell us how wrong we are. We love that.
I mean, please.
Yeah.
Well, I need to know if I'm wrong. I probably am a lot.
Yeah, well, yeah. And he doesn't listen to me, so if you'll tell him.
All right. Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in about 2 weeks.
All right. See you guys then. Thank you.